Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Today I want to share with you a few mind-bending details and questions from the Harry Potter story. Things that are easy to miss unless you stop to think. This article doesn't claim to be academic. It's more of a chance to have some fun, spark the imagination, and look at familiar things from a new angle. So sit back and let's dive in. Number 1. Big Brother is watching you. At Hogwarts, privacy is nearly a myth. Students, teachers, filch, portraits, ghosts, house elves, random animagi, and of course Peeves. Someone is always around. And then there's one more artifact, the Marauder's Map. It flawlessly shows the location of everyone in the castle. Neither Polyjuice Potion nor Animagus abilities can fool it. Here's the curious part. Hermione managed to keep her use of the Time Turner a secret for quite a while, but the map could have easily revealed her double presence. Harry probably didn't check it during classes, but Lupin, who once confiscated the map, might have noticed 2 Hermiones in the castle and realized the Time Turner was being used for far more than just schoolwork. Number 2 side effect. The Time Turner gave Hermione the ability to attend every class, but at a steep cost. She exhausted herself so badly that by year's end she gave up some subjects. But if you think deeper, Hermione lived through certain hours twice, meaning she wasn't studying for 10 months like everyone else. She was living far more. How much more we can't say, but certainly weeks, maybe even months. Which means Hermione was physically older than her friends. The Time Turner literally shortened her lifespan by accelerating her inner aging. And what if she had kept using it? Number 3, questions of feeding. Now let's talk about Dementors. Everyone knows their terrifying kiss that drains the soul. But here's the twist. What would have happened if Harry had been subjected to it? Would the Dementor have consumed both souls, Harry's and Voldemort's fragment? Or just one of them? Perhaps it would have found the Dark Lord's shard indigestible? And if only Voldemort's fragment remained, could it have taken control of Harry's body, acting independently, like the memory in Tom Riddle's diary? Here's an even wilder thought. Could a Dementor who absorbed such a soul itself become a Horcrux? Imagine a Horcrux in the form of a Dementor. Could it even be destroyed? Number 4, everyday questions. Since we're on the subject of Dementors, let's talk Azkaban. Supposedly the worst place in the wizarding world. But here's the question, who handles the mundane chores? Do Dementors themselves confiscate belongings, cook food, bury the dead? It's hard to picture a Dementor in an apron. That suggests there must be humans working there, at least temporarily. Hopefully they're paid well for hazard duty, because no one lasts long near Dementors. And clearly Ministry staff do visit. They deliver new prisoners, release the wrongly convicted, sometimes conduct inspections. But as Hagrid said, Dementors don't willingly let anyone go. Number 5. A Horcrux. 4. A Horcrux. Here's one of the most intriguing questions. Could Harry, being a Horcrux himself, create one of his own? Would he need to kill someone to do it? Or was the burden of his past already enough? Would Quirrell count, or the Basilisk? And if he did succeed, would the new object be Harry's Horcrux, or Voldemort's? Or could Harry have used it to transfer the Dark Lord's fragment into the artifact and rid himself of it? The last idea sounds like fan fiction, but it's fascinating nonetheless. Number 6, incredible luck. And finally, a question of logic. What are the odds that a boy with poor eyesight would be chosen as seeker for a Quidditch team? Harry's glasses solved one problem but created others. They could fly off mid-game, shatter from a bludger, or fog up in the rain. Readers will recall how in Prisoner of Azkaban, Hermione had to cast a charm on his glasses during a match just to make them water repellent. Until then, Harry was nearly useless on the field. Yes, it was a risky choice for the team, but Harry's skill made up for it. Still, the Gryffindor captain was clearly making a desperate gamble. Number 7, hygiene problems. The books rarely mention hygiene at Hogwarts, yet we catch glimpses that raise strange questions. Prefects have access to a grand bathroom with stained glass and a pool-sized tub where Harry once struggled with the golden egg. A stone basin the size of a swimming pool stood in the middle of the floor. Goblet of fire. But if such luxury exists only for a few, what about the rest? Hundreds of students crowded into drafty towers or damp dungeons with no clear mention of showers or washrooms. Did Ravenclaw and Gryffindor share communal baths? Did Slytherins endure icy underground water near the Black Lake? Magic offers shortcuts, of course. Hermione once used the Scourgify charm to clean bird droppings from Harry's robes. A flick of the wand and filth disappears. But this convenience hides a problem. Students might grow up never needing soap, never brushing teeth, never learning basic care. An entire generation could rely on spells instead of habits. The thought is unsettling. What happens when magic fails or a wand is lost? A society that replaces hygiene with charms might be elegant on the surface, but fragile underneath. Number 8. Elf exploitation. House elves at Hogwarts remain invisible to most students, yet they know more than anyone else in the castle. They sweep dormitories, clean common rooms, and prepare feasts without ever being noticed. When Harry first visited the kitchens, he was shocked to see dozens of elves working happily under Dobby's command. "We is house elves, sir. We is doing what we ought to do, sir," Winky told him in Goblet of Fire. But their constant presence means they must witness everything, arguments, confessions, even forbidden secrets, while remaining silent. Think of Hermione's time turner. For a year she darted between classes, vanishing from one room and appearing in another. Could the elves really have missed it? They polished tables, picked up stray books, and surely saw her double schedule. Yet none spoke. The same is true for Sirius Black hiding near Gryffindor Tower. The fat lady panicked, but the elves, who cleaned those corridors, would have noticed disturbances too. Their loyalty bound them into silence. Privacy at Hogwarts was never in the hands of students or professors, it was in the hands of the elves. This creates a disturbing picture. The wizarding world treats elves as servants, but in truth, they are the perfect watchers. They see without being seen, hear without being asked, and carry the knowledge of every hidden act. If ever one of them broke free like Dobby did, and chose to tell what they knew, the world of magic would shake with scandal. The true power of Hogwarts may not rest in Dumbledore's office, but in the quiet, watchful eyes of the elves scrubbing the floors. Number 9. Sleeping monsters. The basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets proved that even Dumbledore did not know every secret of the castle. For centuries, a deadly serpent lived beneath the feet of students, waiting for a Parselmouth to call it. When Harry first saw the writing on the wall, "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware," he realized that Hogwarts itself could hide monsters no one had ever imagined. If such a creature could sleep for generations undetected, what else might lie in the shifting foundations of the school? The castle constantly changes. Staircases move, doors appear only when asked, and rooms like the Room of Requirement come and go at will. Even Professor McGonagall admitted she did not know all the secrets of the building. "Hogwarts is a very old place. It has its secrets," she once said, Philosopher's Stone. That line carries more weight when we remember how the Marauders discovered hidden passages on their map, and how even Filch was surprised by some corridors. If living staircases can shift at will, why not entire chambers designed to keep something hidden? It is not hard to imagine that the founders left more than one test for their descendants. Salazar Slytherin built a chamber for a monster? Could Rowena Ravenclaw or Helga Hufflepuff have left their own guardians, creatures, or enchantments buried in stone? Perhaps the castle itself shelters them until the right time. The basilisk was only the first revelation. Hogwarts might still be watching, waiting for the day when other sleeping creatures stir. Number 10. Muggle technologies. Arthur Weasley's obsession with plugs and batteries always felt like a joke, yet behind it hides a real question. Why do wizards avoid even the simplest Muggle inventions? In Chamber of Secrets, when Mr. Weasley asked Harry to explain the function of a rubber duck, it showed how distant the magical world is from even the most trivial modern objects. Wizards seem content with torches on the walls and parchment for letters, while Muggles have long since moved to electricity and phones. It feels less like tradition and more like deliberate refusal. Think of Hogwarts itself. The castle glows with flickering candles, staircases groan, and messages travel by owl. But why? A school of magic that can enchant portraits and create living chess pieces surely could adapt to telephone. Instead, communication relies on fireplaces or Patronus messengers. Even Hermione, the most curious mind of her generation, never suggested introducing a radio or a lamp. When Lee Jordan hosted Potterwatch during the war, Deathly Hallows, the rebels used a magical frequency instead of a normal broadcast. It was clever, but it also showed how wizards reinvent what Muggles already solved. There is also the issue of interference. Hermione once explained, all those electrical things, they go haywire around Hogwarts, Goblet of Fire. Magic disrupts technology, shorting it out or twisting it into chaos. That means even if a wizard wanted to use a flashlight in the Forbidden Forest, it would likely sputter and die. This is why Arthur Weasley's attempts to enchant a Ford Anglia ended in disaster. Magic and mechanics clashed until the car itself developed a mind. It suggests that the magical world lives in medieval shadows not by choice but by necessity. And here lies the frightening thought. If Muggles continue advancing, one day their technology may overcome this barrier. Planes, satellites, digital systems. What happens when something emerges that magic cannot disrupt? Wizards may laugh at plugs and computers now, but their refusal to adapt makes them vulnerable. The statute of secrecy keeps them hidden, yet it cannot hold forever. If Muggle technology grows strong enough to pierce their concealments, the world of wizards may find itself hopelessly outdated, clinging to candles while surrounded by satellites. Number 11. The mystery of portraits. The portraits in Hogwarts are not silent decorations. They whisper, argue, and even spy. When Dumbledore died, his portrait appeared in the headmaster's office almost immediately. It was not a blank canvas, but a version of him, ready to offer guidance. He will not be gone from this office. He will only be moving to another canvas, Phineas Nigellus once reminded Order of the Phoenix. But who exactly is this Dumbledore in paint? Is it truly him, or a shadow stitched into oil and pigment? Consider the fat lady guarding the Gryffindor Tower. She scolded Harry and his friends, demanded passwords, even panicked when attacked by Sirius Black. Her behavior showed not just programmed responses, but memory and fear. She remembered faces, insults, and betrayals. If she was merely a spell, why did she sulk and refuse entry for days? It suggests something deeper, an echo of a soul, perhaps unwillingly trapped in her gilded frame. Then there is Phineas Nigellus Black, the former headmaster. His portrait travelled between Hogwarts and Grimmauld Place, carrying messages for Dumbledore. At one point he sneered, "I was the least popular headmaster Hogwarts ever had." Order of the Phoenix. That confession is not a generic imprint. It is memory, regret, even bitterness. These qualities belong to a man, not to an enchanted painting. If his essence lingers, then every portrait in the castle could be holding fragments of the dead. And this leads to a chilling thought. If portraits truly hold shards of the person, what becomes of the rest? Do wizards split themselves willingly, leaving behind an eternal copy while the soul moves on? Or are these painted beings doomed to exist forever in limbo, half-conscious, forever repeating snatches of their former lives? Perhaps that explains why so many portraits are irritable, restless, and meddling. They are not mere pictures, they are prisoners of their own likeness. Number 12. Exam nightmares. Exams at Hogwarts are never just paper and ink. They are a test of raw magic, performed in front of professors who judge every flick of the wand. We see snippets of this in Harry's first year. Students are asked to make pineapples tap dance and turn mice into snuff boxes. Hermione did the best. She turned a mouse into a snuff box with whiskers still sticking out of it. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. But what happens when someone fails completely? The books never explain. There is no clear punishment, no mention of what becomes of those who cannot control their spells. Imagine Neville Longbottom in his early years. His wand backfires, he forgets incantations, he stumbles through potions. He once made his toad Trevor swell dangerously after a miscast charm. What if he had failed his exams repeatedly? Would he be expelled? And if so, expelled into what? A half-trained wizard in the Muggle world is not just helpless, he is a danger. The statute of secrecy demands control. An accidental explosion in a Muggle kitchen or a spell gone wrong in the middle of a street could expose everything, yet the school seems to have no plan for this. The Ministry of Magic should have protocols, but none are mentioned. They intervene when underage magic is performed, like when Harry inflated Aunt Marge. They send letters, issue warnings, even threaten expulsion. But with students who simply cannot master their wands, what then? Do they assign obliviators to clean up after them? Or, more chilling, do they quietly remove such failures from society's memory? The silence in the text leaves the possibility open, and it is unsettling. Perhaps this is why Hogwarts keeps even the weakest students until the end. Failure is simply brushed aside. The shame of low grades is punishment enough. We see this with Ron, who complains about barely scraping through, and yet no one threatens him with expulsion. It suggests a hidden truth. The school is not just about teaching, but about containment. Better to have a struggling wizard inside the castle walls than a failed one roaming freely outside. In the world of Harry Potter, ignorance is dangerous and failure might be the darkest fate of all. Number 13. Dark Secrets of the Gryffindor Sword. The Sword of Godric. Gryffindor is more than just a relic hanging in the headmaster's office. It is a living artifact forged with goblin craftsmanship and bound to Gryffindor's legacy. We know it absorbs that which makes it stronger. When Harry plunged the blade into the basilisk deep under the Chamber of Secrets, the sword drank in the venom. That venom made it deadly to Horcruxes, a detail revealed only later when Dumbledore explained, "It will take in only that which makes it stronger." Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. But the sword's history stretches across centuries. What else has it consumed in that time? Picture the great battles waged in the name of Hogwarts. The goblins who forged it once claimed it back, and later lost it again. Wizards drew it in duels, blood spilled across its edge. Could such a sword hold echoes of those who wielded it? Their triumphs, their despair, their rage? When Neville Longbottom pulled it from the Sorting Hat in the Battle of Hogwarts, he was not just holding steel, he was lifting the weight of every hand that ever grasped it, every drop of blood it had absorbed. Neville's strike against Nagini shows how charged the blade had become. The serpent was Voldemort's final Horcrux, and yet the sword sliced through her as if destiny itself guided the blow. Why Neville? Why then? The sword appears only in the hands of those truly Gryffindor at heart, as though the very spirit of its former master chooses the moment. Only a true Gryffindor could have pulled that out of the hat, Dumbledore told Harry years earlier, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. The blade itself decides when to surface, as if it carries the will of those whose blood and magic live within it. Perhaps this is why the sword feels so heavy in the story, not in metal, but in memory. When Harry lifted it against the locket Horcrux, he felt the resistance of the dark magic screaming from within. When Neville raised it before Nagini, he felt the courage of Gryffindor burning in his veins. Every wielder is never alone with the sword. They carry centuries of battles, voices, and shadows with them. It is not just an artifact of power, but a silent archive of pain and valor, waiting to emerge only when the world teeters on the edge of collapse. Number 14. Strange economics of the wizarding world. Under the flickering light of Diagon Alley, the marble-white facade of Gringotts seems like the very heart of wizarding society. Every witch and wizard must pass through those tall doors at some point in their lives. Yet, when we look deeper, the picture becomes unsettling. There is no other bank, no other vault, no alternative system. The goblins hold every coin, every deposit, every piece of wealth that fuels the magical world. A society that relies entirely on a single institution cannot call itself free. For what would happen if the goblins decided one day that their cooperation was no longer worth it? J.K. Rowling describes Gringotts as the safest place in the world for anything you want to keep safe, except perhaps Hogwarts. But that reassurance hides a frightening truth. The goblins have a monopoly, and monopolies mean power. The power of Gringotts is not simply about guarding treasure. It is about dictating the terms of the economy itself. A monopoly can raise fees, impose conditions, or even close its doors entirely, leaving wizards helpless. Imagine Arthur Weasley arriving one morning with his meagre salary from the Ministry of Magic, only to be told the vault service now costs twice as much. He has no other option. The Weasley family cannot move their few galleons to a competing institution because no competitor exists. The goblins, clever and proud, would control not just metal, but livelihood. That power imbalance paints a picture not of partnership, but of quiet subjugation. The money itself deepens the strangeness. Galleons, sickles, knuts, a system of precious metal coins that seems archaic even by wizarding standards. 1 galleon equals 17 sickles, 1 sickle equals 29 nuts. Why such uneven numbers? It makes conversion complicated, impractical, and oddly inconvenient for a society where wizards can conjure feasts with a wave of a wand. J.K. Rowling once mentioned that the coinage is deliberately clunky, but in-universe it suggests a structure designed not for ease, but for control. If the goblins mint the coins, then the goblins decide their worth, and wizards simply accept it. Ron Weasley famously mutters to Harry, 17 sickles to a teak's galleon and 29 nuts to a sickle. It's mad, isn't it? Yet the madness benefits those who issue the coins. This brings us to the glaring silence about taxes. Nowhere in the books do we hear of wizards paying income tax, property tax, or even sales tax. And yet the Ministry of Magic is vast. It houses entire departments: the Department of Magical Games and Sports, the Department of Mysteries, the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. It maintains auras like Kingsley Shacklebolt, a full judicial system with Wizengamot trials, and even the Obliviators who wipe the minds of unlucky muggles. Where does this money come from? Are all these civil servants working out of sheer loyalty? Or is there a hidden flow of galleons that the books never address? The silence is louder than any answer. One theory suggests that the ministry thrives on fines and confiscations. Every time the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office charges someone like Mundungus Fletcher, perhaps the galleons flow back into government coffers. Yet such irregular income cannot fund an empire. Hogwarts itself, with its countless teachers, moving staircases, enchanted ceilings and feasts, must require enormous resources. Who pays for it? Tuition is never mentioned explicitly, though Draco Malfoy's sneer that Hogwarts is the best school in Europe hints at exclusivity. But if the Weasleys can afford to send 7 children, tuition must be minimal or non-existent. A free education system suggests heavy state funding, and state funding requires a steady income, and so we are left with the haunting question: does the ministry run on invisible taxation, or perhaps a kind of magical levy woven into wizarding society? The lack of credit and loans is equally bizarre. Harry Potter inherits a vault full of gold, conveniently solving his financial troubles. But what about those without ancestral wealth? What happens to a young witch with talent but no means to buy robes, cauldrons, and textbooks? Muggle society invented credit to bridge such gaps, but Wizarding Britain offers nothing of the sort. We never hear of bank loans, mortgages, or installment payments. The Weasleys live in the Burrow, a home charming but crumbling, and yet they never speak of a mortgage. This absence implies a rigid society where wealth remains static. If you are born poor, you remain poor. Gringotts may protect fortunes, but it does not grow them, trapping families in their inherited place on the social ladder. It is no coincidence that families like the Malfoys flourish, while families like the Weasleys struggle. Lucius Malfoy's galleons give him influence at the ministry, sway over school governors, and even a role in Voldemort's return. When Cornelius Fudge hesitates to act, Lucius merely opens his purse. Money is political power, and with Gringotts at the centre, those who own vaults full of gold dominate the rest. The Malfoys are one of the oldest pure-blood families, Hermione explains, and the wealth they control ensures their status. A society without financial mobility is a society where power calcifies into the hands of the few. Consider, too, the pricing system of the magical world. A wand costs 7 galleons, according to Mr. Ollivander. A wand is the single most essential tool for a wizard, the very extension of their magic. Yet the price seems oddly uniform, suggesting that the value is arbitrarily fixed. Contrast this with the price of a firebolt broomstick, mentioned as costing over 100 galleons, more than 10 times the cost of a wand. The inconsistency raises questions. If wizards can enchant items with labor and spells rather than manufacturing costs, why do some goods cost exponentially more? Could it be that goblins or a small circle of suppliers manipulate the market, keeping some essentials affordable while inflating luxuries to dizzying heights? Number 15. Overly smart objects. The sorting hat was not just a piece of fabric stitched together in the Middle Ages. It was a voice, an intelligence, a presence that could pierce the thoughts of every student who placed it on their head. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, we hear it whisper into Harry's mind, considering Slytherin before giving in to his resistance. "You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head." Those words reveal something chilling. The hat is not simply repeating pre-programmed phrases, but weighing human potential, judging, persuading, and reasoning. That means it is thinking, but if it is thinking, then the uncomfortable question arises. Is the hat suffering from the burden of its eternal role? For centuries, it has been forced to repeat the same task every September, confronting wave after wave of anxious 11-year-olds. Imagine centuries of voices, centuries of minds, centuries of pressure. What if the hat once longed to stop, but it cannot? The life of an enchanted object in Hogwarts might sound like a whimsical footnote to the magical world, yet it carries the shadow of something darker. The hat was created when the four founders imbued it with their intelligence, and in that moment they may have accidentally imprisoned a fragment of themselves in cloth and thread. Rowena Ravenclaw's wisdom, Godric Gryffindor's daring, Helga Hufflepuff's fairness, Salazar Slytherin's cunning, each echo lingers in the hat's mind. But are these echoes just memories, or are they conscious? Fragments crying out in silence. The hat jokes, sings, and seems content. But a reader who listens closely hears the fatigue in its songs. Its opening verses in Order of the Phoenix carry warnings of danger and calls for unity, as though the hat itself feels the weight of history pressing down upon it. Can a hat grow weary of being ignored? Now consider the chess pieces in Philosopher's Stone. They are not simple pawns and rooks carved from stone. They fight, they break, they follow orders, and they argue back when a player gives foolish commands. When Ron takes control of the giant chess set guarding the Philosopher's Stone, the pieces respond with obedience, but also with the individuality of soldiers under his command. They smash each other to bits in violent combat, and yet, when shattered, they can be repaired and returned to the board. If a piece can die in one moment and be rebuilt in the next, what does death even mean for them? If they can feel pain, and their shrieks of rage and the violent crashes suggest they do, then are wizards guilty of forcing sentient beings into endless cycles of destruction? The Monster Book of Monsters, introduced in Prisoner of Azkaban, adds another unsettling example. Harry's copy bites his hand, snaps at students, and requires a belt to keep it closed. The trick is to stroke its spine, Hagrid explains, as though teaching students how to calm a dangerous animal. This is not an inanimate object performing a charm. It is a creature with instincts. It reacts to fear, to aggression, to touch. That suggests an internal mechanism of recognition, a primitive form of mind. If a book can hunger, can it also suffer? Students laugh at its antics, but perhaps no one ever considered whether this joke is the imprisonment of a restless soul inside pages and leather binding. In this context, the Marauder's map feels even more disturbing. James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew created a parchment that sees and knows everything within Hogwarts. "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good," is the phrase that awakens it, and at once the map springs alive, showing footsteps, names, and secret passages. The map is not only aware of every living presence, but is also capable of hiding its secrets from those it dislikes, such as when Severus Snape tries to read it. The map insults him, calling him an ugly git. That insult is not the echo of James or Sirius, for the Marauders were long dead when Snape attempted it. Rather, it is the map itself, speaking with a will born from its enchantment. If the map is aware enough to express contempt, then is it also aware of the centuries of secrets it has kept hidden? And what of the sword of Gryffindor? Unlike other enchanted objects, the sword seems almost alive in its timing. It appears only to a true Gryffindor in moments of dire need. In Chamber of Secrets it presents itself to Harry when he faces the basilisk. In Deathly Hallows it emerges for Neville Longbottom during the final battle. The sword seems to choose, waiting in silence until courage summons it forth. This is not the passive glint of steel, but the active judgment of an ancient artifact. It remembers battles, absorbs venom, grows stronger from what harms it. Such behavior is not mechanical, it is evolutionary. If it learns, then what is it learning toward? A destiny? A will of its own? Enchanted objects like the diary of Tom Riddle push this boundary to an extreme. At first glance, it is only an old-school diary, but when Harry writes in it, words appear in reply. Tom's memory laughs, explains, deceives, and ultimately manipulates Ginny Weasley into nearly killing her peers. This is not simply a cursed notebook, it is a fragment of Voldemort's soul. Yet how many lesser artifacts in the wizarding world also contain echoes of thought that are never called Horcruxes? If the Sorting Hat houses the minds of the founders, what separates it from the diary? Why do we comfort ourselves by naming one an object and the other a dark creation? Number 16. Politics beyond Britain. The magical world of Harry Potter appears at first glance to be a distinctly British story, rooted in the cobblestone streets of London, the Gothic halls of Hogwarts, and the bureaucratic corridors of the Ministry of Magic. Yet once the veil is lifted, hints of a broader network emerge. Beauxbatons, Durmstrang, and Ilvermorny are not just schools, they are the cultural pillars of other nations, each representing an entire magical civilization. This raises a question that J.K. Rowling only brushed upon but never fully explored. What does magical international politics truly look like, and how does it intersect with the tumultuous events of the non-magical 20th century? Consider the timeline. The International Statute of Secrecy was established in 1692, a law that formally isolated magical society from the eyes of Muggles. On the surface, it appears as a protective measure designed to shield wizards from persecution and fear. Yet its global enforcement required unprecedented cooperation between magical authorities from different continents. A French witch casting charms in Marseille, a Russian wizard invoking runes in St. Petersburg, and an American aura enforcing law in Boston all had to agree on a set of invisible rules. The very existence of this statute implies an international order, a kind of United Nations of sorcery, though far more secretive and perhaps far more ruthless. During the Second World War, the global landscape of both Muggles and wizards must have been shaken to its core. Britain fought against Nazi Germany from 1939 to 1945, and every reader of Harry Potter knows that Gellert Grindelwald rose to prominence in precisely this same era. Grindelwald, introduced in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, was described as the most dangerous dark wizard of all time, second only to Voldemort. His ideology of wizarding supremacy bore an uncanny resemblance to Hitler's own racial doctrines. For the greater good was Grindelwald's chilling motto, and it echoed the language of tyrants. The question then arises, was Grindelwald's campaign the magical reflection of the Muggle War, or was the Muggle War merely a symptom of deeper magical conflicts? Durmstrang, the school hidden somewhere in northern or eastern Europe, provides an interesting lens through which to view this tension. Known for its emphasis on the dark arts rather than their defense, Durmstrang has long carried the reputation of producing wizards who flirt with dangerous ideologies. Victor Krum, introduced in Goblet of Fire, comes from this institution, and even he admits that the school's past includes questionable allegiances. One can imagine that during the 1930s and 40s, Durmstrang became a breeding ground for sympathizers of Grindelwald's vision. Was it coincidental that Grindelwald established his fortress, Nurmengard, in Central Europe? The very location suggests that wizarding movements were entangled with the chaos of the Muggle world. Meanwhile, the French wizarding community, embodied in Beauxbatons, might have faced dilemmas mirroring those of Vichy France. Did they collaborate, resist, or hide in silent neutrality? Madame Olympe Maxime, the headmistress, is portrayed in Goblet of Fire as both elegant and politically astute, capable of managing diplomacy at the Tri-Wizard tournament. Such qualities hint that French wizarding leaders were not mere bystanders in history, but likely engaged in complex negotiations, balancing their secrecy with moral choices during global conflict. The very absence of explicit mentions in the novels suggests a silence born of design, as if Rowling herself wanted to leave a void where readers could speculate about hidden wars. The United States, too, cannot be ignored. Ilvermorny's School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, perched atop Mount Greylock in Massachusetts, represents an American tradition of magic that is distinct yet intertwined with old-world practices. By the 1940s, America had become a decisive player in the Muggle War, entering after the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. Could its wizarding community have remained detached? It strains belief. Magical institutions in America were famously strict about secrecy, especially given the country's Puritan past. But secrecy does not mean passivity. Auras, the American equivalent of magical law enforcers, may well have been deployed to counter threats that never reached the history books of Muggle classrooms. If we take Grindelwald as an example, his arrest in 1945 by none other than Albus Dumbledore perfectly aligns with the conclusion of World War II. The books state it clearly: Dumbledore defeated Grindelwald in 1945. This single line, almost casually dropped in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, is a thunderclap once contextualized. While Muggle armies celebrated victory over Hitler, the wizarding world simultaneously celebrated the defeat of its own dark tyrant. The symmetry is too striking to dismiss as coincidence. It suggests parallel wars fought on two planes, one visible, one invisible, yet both profoundly shaping the destinies of nations. This duality creates unsettling questions. Were some battles of World War II actually influenced by magical intervention? Did the fall of Berlin hide not only Soviet tanks but also duels of flame and curse between German dark wizards and Allied defenders? It is possible that certain catastrophic bombings or inexplicable military blunders were not accidents but magical sabotage. A firestorm over Dresden might have been enhanced by cursed winds. A sudden fog on the English Channel could have been conjured by British witches to protect fleeing soldiers. The statute of secrecy then becomes less an act of protection and more a curtain that obscures the magical fingerprints etched onto Muggle wars. Number 17. Ghosts and their secret rules. The ghosts of Hogwarts are not merely decorative figures drifting through its candlelit halls. They are remnants of human choices, fragments of unfinished lives that cling to the castle walls like whispers of regret. When nearly headless Nick first confides in Harry about the reality of becoming a ghost, he describes it not as a privilege, but as a limitation. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Nick explains, "I was afraid of death. I chose to remain behind. I sometimes wonder whether I oughtn't have..." Well, that is neither here nor there. In fact, I am neither here nor there. This statement alone reveals the chilling truth. Ghosts are not spirits of honor, but testimonies of fear, a decision to reject the final step beyond life. They exist in the in-between, cursed by hesitation, condemned to remain echoes rather than memories. The clearest example of this curse is nearly headless Nick himself. He was a wizard of some repute, a courtier of King Henry VII's time, but his botched execution left him humiliated in life and tormented in death. Unlike James Potter or Sirius Black, who embraced death without compromise, Nick clung to existence through fear, and the result was an eternity of incompleteness. His inability to pass on is not a gift of choice, but a punishment for it. He admits to Harry that he regrets his decision, for as a ghost he can never taste food again, never feel warmth, and never experience the sensations of life that make existence worthwhile. His translucent form is an eternal reminder that fear of death is worse than death itself. The bloody baron, draped in silver bloodstains, embodies a darker side of this phenomenon. His story, revealed through hushed whispers among the students, is one of violence and guilt. He murdered Helena Ravenclaw in a fit of rage and then took his own life. Instead of moving beyond, he remained tethered to the world of the living, perhaps not out of fear, but because his sins chained him there. His blood-stained appearance is not just a spectral design, but a representation of his eternal penance. The Baron becomes a warning that ghosts may also be prisoners of their crimes, unable to escape the weight of what they have done, locked into the castle where their choices were most damning. The Fat Friar, the ghost of Hufflepuff, tells another story. A gentle man in life executed for his unorthodox practices of curing the sick with magic, he returned as a ghost not for vengeance, but perhaps because his kindness left him too attached to the living world. Yet even in his cheerful demeanour, one can sense an eternal sadness. He laughs with students, glows with benevolence, yet he never crosses the barrier into peace. His presence suggests that even good men, if bound by unfinished missions or attachments, may linger unwillingly. The friar's story expands the spectrum of ghosthood. It is not only fear or crime that binds a soul, but sometimes love itself, tragically twisted into a chain. And yet, the contrast with characters like James and Lily Potter is striking. Both had every reason to remain, especially Lily, who sacrificed herself out of love for her child. Yet they do not haunt Hogwarts or Godric's Hollow. Instead, they pass on, returning only in fleeting magical echoes, such as the Priori Incantatem vision or through the Resurrection Stone. This distinction is crucial. Love, when embraced fully, leads to transcendence. Fear, when clung to desperately, results in entrapment. Lily accepted death with courage, and so her presence is felt in Harry's protection, in his very blood, rather than as a ghost bound to corridors. In this sense, the Potters proved that ghosts are not guardians of love, but monuments of fear and regret. Sirius Black provides an even more telling contrast. His life was filled with injustice, betrayal, and torment in Azkaban. If anyone had reason to cling to life, it was Sirius. Yet when he falls through the veil in the Department of Mysteries, there is no ghost to linger, no echo of his laughter in Grimmauld Place. His acceptance is immediate and final. The veil itself represents the true passage into death, a doorway that once crossed cannot be returned from. Sirius's absence as a ghost shows that those who embrace the unknown with courage pass beyond, while those who tremble before it, like Nick, remain behind in shadows. The mechanism is not random, it is a moral and emotional law that governs the very fabric of magic. When Harry seeks comfort after Sirius's death, nearly headless Nick explains the reality bluntly. Wizards can leave an imprint of themselves upon the earth, to walk palely where their living selves once trod, but very few choose that path. This reveals that ghosthood is not universal. It is a choice of desperation. Only those who dread death more than the emptiness of spectral existence will trap themselves. It is a grim irony. The very attempt to cling to life ensures the most lifeless eternity. Nick himself embodies the lesson he teaches, a man who feared the unknown so deeply that he condemned himself to something worse. The implications for Hogwarts are unsettling. A school filled with children is also filled with ghosts who embody unresolved terror and regret. Students dine beside spirits who are not joyful mentors but broken reflections. To live daily in the presence of these pale forms is to grow up among silent warnings. This is what becomes of those who cannot let go. The cheerful appearances of the friar or the jokes of Peeves, who is technically a poltergeist, disguise the deeper truth that these beings are not examples of magic's wonders, but of its tragedies. Every corridor that echoes with their voices is a reminder of the price of fear. Consider the moment when Harry uses the resurrection stone in the Deathly Hallows. He is surrounded by James, Lily, Sirius, and Remus, who appear not as ghosts, but as true, powerful echoes of themselves, warm and comforting. They are not bound to the earth, but visit him from beyond, free from suffering. James tells him, "We are part of you, invisible to everyone else." That distinction separates the true afterlife from the prison of ghosthood. These figures bring comfort precisely because they passed on, while the ghosts of Hogwarts only inspire melancholy because they could not. The stone makes it clear the living dead are not those who pass, but those who refuse to. Ghosthood, then, is not immortality, but stasis. The living world moves on, grows, celebrates, and forgets, while ghosts remain unchanging. They cannot learn, cannot touch, cannot feel, cannot even communicate fully with the living beyond words. They are as static as portraits, but without the artistry. To encounter them is to meet someone trapped in their final state of mind forever, unable to grow. That eternal stagnation makes them far more tragic than triumphant. Hogwarts does not house 4 noble house ghosts. It shelters 4 souls who failed to move forward, each one carrying the burden of unfinished stories. The existence of ghosts also challenges the wizarding world's understanding of morality. If fear alone can condemn someone to endless wandering, then the bravest are rewarded with peace, while the fearful are punished with eternity. This makes ghosthood less a magical curiosity and more a moral warning. It suggests that courage in facing death is not simply admirable, but essential. Wizards who spend their lives clinging to safety, refusing to embrace the final passage, doom themselves. In this way, ghosts embody one of the most profound messages of the series, that death, though terrifying, must be accepted, for to deny it is worse. Even in the case of Moaning Myrtle, the tragedy is sharpened by this truth. Myrtle was killed young by the basilisk's stare, a victim rather than a sinner. Yet her bitterness and pettiness in death show how her attachment to grudges prevented her from moving on. She haunts the bathroom, forever locked in the humiliation and misery of her final years. Myrtle's ghost demonstrates that youth itself is no shield against the binding of regret. If she had been able to let go, she might have joined the nameless children who passed peacefully. But instead she lingers, sobbing eternally over insults from Olive Hornby. Her ghosthood is not justice, but the weight of her inability to release the pain. Thus the ghosts of Hogwarts are not mentors, not companions, but warnings. They represent what happens when fear, guilt, or grief is allowed to control the final moment of life. Each one is a story cut short, a chapter that refuses to close, a presence that cannot move on. When students whisper about Nearly Headless Nick or shiver at the Bloody Baron, they are not merely encountering colourful figures of school lore, but the truth that magic cannot conquer mortality. Only courage can. The Potters, Sirius, Lupin, and countless others prove it. Those who embrace death pass on to peace. Those who resist remain behind, pale reminders that the true curse is not dying, but refusing to. Number 18. Strange Rules of Transfiguration. Of all the branches of magic explored in the Harry Potter world, Transfiguration stands out as both the most elegant and the most terrifying. Minerva McGonagall's classes were often depicted as strict, precise, and demanding, requiring students to summon all their concentration to turn a single matchstick into a needle. The books describe Harry's frustration when his matchstick retained the wood grain, even after sharpening into a metallic point. What J.K. Rowling shows as a schoolroom challenge seems innocent on the surface, but beneath lies a darker set of implications. When we begin to imagine the consciousness of the creatures and the unstable reality of matter reshaped by magic, the very foundation of transfiguration starts to resemble a dangerous experiment in existence itself. The most vivid moment of tension appears in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, when McGonagall demonstrates her mastery by transforming herself into a tabby cat before the stunned first years. The crowd gasped as the stern professor suddenly sat on the desk with a flicking tail, but the ease of that demonstration hides a profound mystery. If McGonagall retains her human intelligence while in feline form, then what of the animals transformed into inanimate objects during class? When Ron Weasley fumbled with a spell and his pet rat Scabbers turned partially into a goblet, the scene was humorous to the students, yet chilling to any reader who considered the hidden reality. Was the rat's mind aware while trapped inside the metallic shell of a cup? Did it feel the strain of its organs reshaping, only to be restored again when the charm faltered? The comedy masks a potential horror. The rules of transfiguration are precise. McGonagall insists repeatedly that transfiguration is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts. This sentence, often read quickly by children eager to get to Quidditch or charms, is in fact a dire warning. Dangerous in what way? A misfired spell might leave a student with rabbit ears, or perhaps a feather that resists returning to its original form. But more unsettling is the possibility that an animal's consciousness is not erased during its transformation, only suspended or trapped. If so, then lessons where beetles become buttons may be remembered by the beetle as a blur of suffocating stillness, a moment when its body ceased to be what it was. The implication is cruel and raises the question of whether Hogwarts students were trained to disregard the ethical dimension of their magical art. This tension grows sharper when we move from animals to food. In Deathly Hallows, Hermione Granger explains to Ron and Harry the principle of Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration. Food is the first of the 5 principal exceptions to Gamp's law. You can summon it if you know where it is, you can transform it. You can increase the quantity if you've already got some, but you can't make it out of nothing. These words anchor one of the most puzzling paradoxes of the magical world. If food cannot be created from nothing, but can be transfigured, then what does that imply about its true essence? Consider the hypothetical transformation of a stone into a steak. On the plate, it looks juicy, marbled, and edible, but is it still carrying the essence of stone beneath the surface glamour? If one eats such a steak, what becomes of the matter once the spell fades? The terrifying scenario is that a transfigured meal is not stable. A stone-turned steak may revert to its mineral form once digestion has begun. Imagine the unsuspecting wizard who bites into the meat, chews, swallows, and suddenly feels his stomach fill with jagged shards of granite. The horror of such an accident would be unspeakable, and yet McGonagall teaches her students to transfigure animals into objects with no apparent concern for similar consequences. If magic allows a reversal at any moment, then the world of transfiguration is built on an unstable foundation where every object may betray its form without warning. The ethical dilemma of consciousness is equally grave. Suppose a cat is transfigured into a water goblet for the sake of a lesson. To the observing class, it is merely an exercise in precision. But if the cat remains aware inside the crystalline prison of glass, then the experience is one of suffocating horror. Time would pass without breath, without heartbeat, without movement. Then, suddenly, restoration. What would the animal remember? Could it describe the sensation if given a voice? McGonagall herself, as an animagus, surely knows the blending of human consciousness with animal instinct. When she moves as a cat, she retains her human awareness, but with sharpened feline senses. By extension, any transfigured being may retain some kernel of its mind, silently suffering in a form designed for utility rather than life. The books provide subtle evidence of this danger. In Goblet of Fire, during the first transfiguration class of the year, McGonagall demonstrates by turning a hedgehog into a pincushion. Harry notices that some of the pincushions still had twitching noses or quills, suggesting the transformation was incomplete. If these hybrid objects remain partly alive, then their awareness may endure in a broken, horrifying state. A hedgehog that half remembers itself while serving as sewing equipment is a creature caught in an existential nightmare. Hogwarts students laugh nervously at such failures, but the ethical implications are darker than any Defense Against the Dark Arts lesson. There is also the question of permanence. Dumbledore explains in Philosopher's Stone that, to the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. But what if a miscast transfiguration spell is worse than death, suspending a living being in an object form indefinitely? Wizards speak of vanishing spells, where an animal disappears into non-being. But McGonagall admits to Neville that such magic is extremely advanced, and a botched attempt may simply disfigure the subject. If every chair or candlestick in Hogwarts could theoretically contain the trapped mind of a once-living creature, then the entire school is built on a foundation of silent prisoners. Transfiguration also raises questions about authenticity. If a stone can become a loaf of bread, does that bread nourish as true food would? Or does it deceive the body with temporary sustenance that vanishes as the magic fades? Hermione's careful explanation of Gamp's law implies that only existing food can be multiplied, not created. This rule suggests that magic cannot cheat the fundamental laws of energy and life. A steak conjured from stone may look real, smell real, and even taste real, but in its essence, it is still stone dressed in flesh. The moment the spell breaks, the eater faces disaster. Thus, wise witches and wizards would never risk transfigured meals, relying instead on conjured duplicates of existing food. The philosophical weight of transfiguration lies in its manipulation of identity. Is a creature defined by its body or by its mind? When a rat is a goblet, is it still a rat? Dumbledore's wisdom often stressed that it is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are far more than our abilities. Yet transfiguration erases choice, reshaping essence against the will of the subject. The spell does not ask permission. It imposes a new identity by force. In this sense, the classroom exercises at Hogwarts flirt with a moral boundary that is never openly acknowledged. To train young wizards to alter life so casually is to normalize power over the very fabric of being. Even more unsettling is the possibility that transfiguration is reversible only under controlled circumstances. If a spell fails midway, what remains is neither one thing nor another. A beetle with metallic wings, a rabbit with porcelain ears, a cat with glass eyes. These are not just comic mishaps. They are grotesque hybrids that defy natural law. For the victim, the experience must be torment. Rowling writes with whimsy about Ron's failed attempts, yet a careful reader feels the chill of the unspoken. Every botched transformation is a life caught between states, suffering in silence until restored. Animagi complicate the picture further. Sirius Black, James Potter, and Peter Pettigrew each mastered the transformation into animal form. They chose it, trained for it, and used it as a tool. In their cases, consciousness remained intact, though filtered through the instincts of their chosen beasts. But their control does not erase the question of forced transfiguration. If McGonagall, with her immense skill, can retain her human mind while shaped as a cat, then it is plausible that an involuntary subject would retain its animal mind while shaped as a cup. The asymmetry is cruel. The animagus transforms by choice, but the classroom mouse becomes a snuff box whether it consents or not. The implications reach even into warfare. Imagine a battlefield where soldiers are transfigured into furniture, hidden or destroyed by manipulation of their forms. Such magic would be the ultimate weapon, far more devastating than a curse. Yet the books scarcely mention such uses, perhaps because Rowling wisely avoided the abyss that such speculation opens. If a human mind can be trapped within a chair, then every banquet in Hogwarts risks being served on sentient dishes, silently screaming beneath silverware and soup. The heart of the matter is that transfiguration, more than any other magic, destabilizes the boundary between life and matter. Charms may levitate, potions may heal, curses may wound, but only transfiguration says what you are is not fixed. It can be rewritten by willpower and words. This truth, if carried to its logical conclusion, makes the practice a quiet horror. For every laugh in McGonagall's classroom, there is a creature whose identity was stolen, even if for a moment. The question is not whether the magic works, but whether it should be used so lightly. The Hogwarts students, young and ambitious, rarely pause to consider these questions. Harry himself, though troubled by many mysteries, never asks whether the pincushion once twitched in fear. Perhaps this silence is the most unsettling part of all. The wizarding world accepts the rewriting of existence as a practical skill without acknowledging the moral abyss beneath it. Transfiguration is not just difficult magic. It is a reminder that in the Harry Potter universe, reality itself is fragile, and the cost of bending it may be cruelty, hidden behind the sparkle of a well-cast spell. Number 19. The Riddle of Immortal Creatures. The world of Harry Potter often confronts us with mysteries that are never fully answered, questions hidden between the lines of Rowling's pages. One of the strangest among them is the existence of creatures that appear to defy time and mortality. A phoenix that dies in flames only to be reborn, unicorns whose very blood is said to grant life, centaurs who seem to carry an ancient wisdom older than men, and the monstrous basilisk whose deadly gaze makes it seem like an immortal terror from primordial times. When we think carefully, the books leave us in a space between awe and doubt. Are these beings truly immortal? Or are we only meant to see them as symbols, legends dressed in feathers and fire? Take Fawkes, the phoenix of Albus Dumbledore, the most vivid embodiment of this mystery. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Rowling describes how Fawkes bursts into flames before Harry's eyes, and moments later, a small, ugly, featherless chick emerges from the ashes. Dumbledore calmly explains, "He is a phoenix, Harry. They burst into flame when it is time for them to die and are reborn from the ashes." It is a moment of astonishment, but also of profound implication. If Fawkes can repeat this cycle indefinitely, then in theory he could live forever. And yet when Dumbledore dies, Fawkes sings his lament and disappears, never to be seen again. Was his immortality tethered to the headmaster's life, or does he exist still, wandering unseen? If immortality were truly part of the phoenix's nature, one would expect the wizarding world to be full of them. There would be colonies of phoenixes in mountain caves or enchanted forests, singing their healing songs and offering feathers for wands. Yet throughout 7 books only Fawkes is named, and he appears not as a wild creature, but as an intimate companion of Dumbledore. This singularity is suspicious. Why is he alone? Why is his presence so closely tied to a man whose life was marked by monumental choices and battles? The absence of other phoenixes suggests they are not ordinary creatures, but manifestations of magic, appearing only when destiny demands their fire. Consider how conveniently Fawkes arrives in moments of crisis. In the Chamber of Secrets, Harry is dying from basilisk venom when Fawkes's tears heal him. In the battle against Voldemort in the Ministry of Magic, Fawkes swallows a killing curse for Dumbledore, an act no mortal bird could perform. These are not coincidences of biology, but orchestrations of narrative fate. A bird born in flames, who appears at exactly the moment he is needed, is less a species and more a force, almost like a guardian conjured by higher powers. His disappearance after Dumbledore's funeral reads less like the migration of a bird and more like the fading of magic whose purpose had been fulfilled. This raises the unsettling possibility that magical creatures in the Potter universe are not animals in the conventional sense. They may instead be living embodiments of magic itself, temporary visitors anchored to human stories. Centaurs, for example, live in the Forbidden Forest, consulting the stars and interpreting fate with a detachment that feels otherworldly. Firenze, who briefly teaches divination at Hogwarts, claims it is not in the nature of a centaur to offer false hope. Their immortality may not be literal but symbolic, an immortality of knowledge, of cosmic perspective, of watching human lives flicker like brief sparks against the eternal sky. They seem less like mortal beings and more like fragments of ancient magic allowed to walk beside men. The unicorn provides another enigma. Its blood, silver and luminous, can sustain a dying person, but at a terrible price. You have slain something pure and defenseless to save yourself, and you will have but a half-life, a cursed life, Firenze tells Harry in Philosopher's Stone. The unicorn is not explicitly immortal, but it embodies a purity so absolute that its essence transcends normal mortality. Why does its death leave such a mark upon the killer's soul? Perhaps because the unicorn is not truly a biological animal, but a shard of purity given form. To kill it is not merely to slay a beast, but to wound the very magic of innocence. Its immortality, then, lies not in endless life, but in the permanence of its symbolic power, a permanence so profound it bends the rules of life and death. Even the basilisk, that monstrous serpent bred by Salazar Slytherin, reflects this paradox. Hatched from a chicken's egg beneath a toad, it is described as growing to an immense size, living hundreds of years, and wielding a gaze that brings instant death. Yet it too is singular. Only one basilisk exists slumbering in the chamber for centuries, waiting for the heir to awaken it. Its longevity and lethality suggest immortality, but in truth, the basilisk is the opposite of the phoenix. If the phoenix represents renewal and healing, the basilisk embodies decay and finality. Its existence is not a natural accident, but a deliberate act of dark creation, proof that even the most ancient magical beasts may be less species than symbols carved into flesh. The question then becomes, if these creatures are not animals in the normal sense, what are they? The evidence points toward them being manifestations of magic shaped by need, destiny, or moral balance. Fawkes existed for Dumbledore, perhaps even because of him. The unicorn appears when innocence must be protected or profaned. The basilisk slumbers until hatred calls it forth. They are mirrors to human choices, not just beasts grazing in magical pastures. If true, this means immortality in the wizarding world is not about endless physical existence, but about magic's eternal response to human fate. Rowling herself hints at this in subtle ways. When Harry holds his wand, whose core is a feather from Fawkes, Ollivander remarks, The wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter. If even fragments of these creatures carry destinies that bind them to human lives, then their entire existence may be intertwined with human history. Fawkes's feather chooses both Harry and Voldemort, linking their fates through the bird's own mysterious essence. That is no accident of avian biology. It is the deliberate hand of magic shaping the course of events through its living vessels. And what of immortality itself? Voldemort spends his life trying to conquer death, splitting his soul into Horcruxes, chasing the legend of the Philosopher's Stone. Yet the creatures who seem closest to immortality do not cling to life. The phoenix accepts fiery death without fear, reborn without question. The centaurs embrace fate and refuse to interfere with destiny. The unicorn embodies a purity so eternal that even death cannot erase its power. In contrast, the basilisk's long existence is only decay stretched over centuries, a shadow of life rather than life itself. Perhaps Rowling is suggesting that immortality cannot be seized, but only lived through acceptance of magic's cycles. The absence of large populations of these beings strengthens this interpretation. If phoenixes reproduced like ordinary birds, their numbers would fill the skies. If unicorns were common, their blood would be harvested and their purity desecrated. If basilisks were easily bred, the wizarding world would have collapsed under their gaze. Their scarcity is essential. They appear as singular emissaries, emerging only where human history demands them. The magical world does not contain them. It is shaped by their rare, purposeful arrival. Some might argue that Rowling simply chose to highlight one phoenix, one unicorn, one basilisk for narrative economy. But the consistency with which these creatures are tied to symbolic roles suggests otherwise. Fawkes's loyalty to Dumbledore, the unicorn's warning against corruption, the basilisk's embodiment of death, all are woven so tightly into human destiny that they defy classification as ordinary fauna. Their so-called immortality is not zoological, but metaphysical, the persistence of archetypes in a world where magic gives flesh to metaphor. It is telling that when Fawkes disappears after Dumbledore's death, no character ever mentions seeing another phoenix. His absence is total, as though his entire existence had been a loan from magic to Dumbledore's story. The phoenix, then, may not be an independent species at all, but a role magic creates when needed. The immortal companion of a great wizard, the flame that dies only to rise again. When the wizard falls, the bird's story closes too. That is not immortality in the human sense, but immortality of purpose. To view magical creatures in this light changes how we read the series. They are not merely set dressing for a fantastical world, but active symbols that embody the deepest conflicts of the story: life and death, purity and corruption, fate and free will. Their immortality, or the illusion of it, is not a question of biology, but of meaning. The phoenix is eternal because hope and renewal are eternal. The unicorn is eternal because innocence never truly dies. The basilisk is eternal because death itself waits for every soul. In this way, Rowling's creatures are immortal not in flesh, but in the truths they represent. Truths that no curse, no killing curse, no Horcrux can erase. And so the unanswered question remains a deliberate mystery. Are these beings truly immortal, or are they legends clothed in magic? The books never say, and perhaps they never need to. What matters is the way they echo the choices of the characters around them. Fawkes disappears, but his feather remains in Harry's wand, guiding him until the final battle. The unicorn dies, but its warning lingers in the cursed life of Voldemort. The basilisk is slain, but its fang becomes the weapon that destroys Horcruxes. Their immortality lies not in their survival, but in the permanence of their impact on the story. In the end, magical creatures in the world of Harry Potter may be less about existing forever and more about reminding us that magic itself never dies, only changes form, waiting for the next story where it is needed. Number 20, excessive trust in prophecies. Of all the elements that shape the world of Harry Potter, nothing feels more haunting than the prophecy whispered in the small, smoky room of the Hog's Head Inn. It was there that Sybil Trelawney, a divination teacher known more for her eccentricity than for genuine visions, uttered words that would alter the fate of two families, ignite a war, and decide the destiny of the wizarding world. And yet, when one looks closer, the whole weight of this prophecy seems less about divine inevitability and more about human obsession with believing that fate can be predicted. It was not the prophecy itself that brought destruction, but rather the way those in power chose to act upon it. Trelawney's career had been a curious one. Students snickered when she foretold the death of at least one pupil every year. Most of her predictions were vague, comical, or outright wrong. In Prisoner of Azkaban, she gravely announced that Harry was born under the baleful influence of Saturn, and she constantly warned of disaster, often to no effect. When she told Neville that he was in grave peril of a deadly misstep, all he did was drop a teacup. Even Professor McGonagall mocked her, saying Sybil had predicted her death every year since she had started teaching. It was, therefore, astonishing that the entire wizarding world eventually placed their trust in one particular vision, as though suddenly every word from Trelawney's lips carried the weight of destiny. The prophecy that mattered was chilling in its precision. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies. The rest sealed its importance, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. These were not the harmless, melodramatic lines Trelawney usually scattered around her classroom. These words found their way to Albus Dumbledore, and unfortunately to Lord Voldemort. But here lies the puzzle. Why did Voldemort, a man of rational cruelty and obsessive control, choose to trust a prophecy delivered by a woman he would otherwise have dismissed as a fraud? The answer lies in belief, not truth. Voldemort's downfall began with the simple act of hearing those words. Half-heard, imperfect, but enough to trigger his paranoia. Instead of dismissing them as a meaningless riddle, he let them infect his decisions. He identified Harry Potter, the child of James and Lily, as the one meant to destroy him. In that single choice, he created the very chain of events that would ensure the prophecy came true. By attacking Harry, Voldemort marked him as his equal, granting him a scar that would bind their fates forever. Ironically, Voldemort's own decision to act upon the prophecy gave it life. Dumbledore himself, in Order of the Phoenix, explained this truth to Harry. He said, "Do you think every prophecy in the Hall of Prophecy has been fulfilled? Of course not. The prophecy does not mean you have to do anything, but the prophecy caused you both to mark each other. In other words, you are free to choose your way, Harry." This statement reveals the tragedy of magical society. Wizards treated prophecies as inevitabilities, when in reality they were possibilities. What happened was not the hand of destiny, but the consequence of fear-driven choices. This blind reliance on prophecy raises an unsettling question. Why were wizards so desperate to see fate written for them? Perhaps it was because the magical world, with all its unpredictability and danger, made people cling to the illusion of certainty. Believing in prophecy offered a strange comfort. Someone else, somewhere, already knew the shape of the future. Yet that comfort turned deadly when the wrong people acted upon it. Voldemort's choices demonstrate how belief can transform a mere prediction into reality. Imagine for a moment a world in which Voldemort ignored Trelawney's words. Harry would have grown up as another boy in Godric's Hollow, perhaps still famous because of his parents' defiance, but never marked as the chosen one. Neville Longbottom, the other child born at the end of July, might never have been suspected. Voldemort could have strengthened his empire instead of breaking himself against a prophecy. This is the terrible irony. The Dark Lord believed in destiny only when it suited his fear, and in so doing, he fulfilled it. There is also something deeply human in the way Voldemort misinterpreted the prophecy. He thought it referred to Harry, not Neville, though both fit the description. He assumed that destroying the child would eliminate the threat, never considering that his own act of choosing would define who the prophecy was about. This is the paradox Dumbledore later pointed out. It was Voldemort himself who selected the boy he thought most likely to be a danger to him, and in doing so he made sure that boy would indeed be so. The prophecy was less a decree and more a trap for those willing to believe in it. The wizarding world had always flirted with divination, even while dismissing it. The Ministry of Magic maintained the Hall of Prophecy, shelves upon shelves of glass orbs whispering predictions that few ever heard. Yet most wizards treated Trelawney with disdain, mocking her classroom theatrics and tea-leaf nonsense. The contradiction is glaring. When a prophecy was vague and harmless, it was ignored. When one appeared dramatic and frightening, it was seized upon with dangerous zeal. That selective faith speaks more about the believers than the seers. Even Harry himself wrestled with this dilemma. When Dumbledore finally revealed the prophecy in Order of the Phoenix, Harry was consumed by anger. He realized that his life had been shaped by words uttered before his birth, and he asked whether it meant he was destined to kill Voldemort or die trying. Dumbledore reminded him that choice, not prophecy, defined his path. Yet this answer, though wise, could not erase the years of manipulation that prophecy had caused. Harry's friends, his childhood, his very identity, had been caught in its shadow. Prophecy in the Harry Potter world is less about foreknowledge and more about psychology. It shows how fear, obsession, and belief shape human decisions. Voldemort believed he was invincible, but the moment he trusted Trelawney's words, he betrayed his own philosophy. He always insisted that he controlled his destiny, yet in that instant he handed control to the prophecy. The irony is profound. The Dark Lord who denied fate became enslaved by it. The tragedy extends beyond Voldemort. Consider the Order of the Phoenix, who also treated the prophecy as sacred truth. Their strategies, their hopes, their sacrifices, all revolved around the idea that Harry was the only one who could end the war. They reinforced the prophecy's power by centering their cause upon it. Even Dumbledore, the wisest of wizards, admitted that he withheld the prophecy from Harry out of fear, waiting until Harry was strong enough to bear its burden. Their secrecy shows how much influence a few words can hold when people believe they come from destiny itself. There is also a moral danger in relying on prophecy. When people are convinced that the future is predetermined, they act less out of responsibility and more out of fatalism. Harry could have fallen into despair, thinking his death inevitable. Voldemort could not see beyond the narrow frame of kill or be killed, never imagining that love, sacrifice, and free will would change the outcome. By chaining themselves to prophecy, both villain and hero risked losing their humanity. Prophecies in the series serve as mirrors, reflecting the characters' fears and ambitions rather than revealing fixed truths. Trelawney's words about the Grim haunted Harry because he already feared death. Her vague predictions about misfortune stuck with her students because they wanted to see omens. And the final prophecy about Voldemort became reality only because he allowed it to dictate his choices. The lesson is clear. Prophecies are not chains unless one decides to wear them. In the end, prophecy reveals less about the future and more about how much people are willing to surrender their will to the idea of fate. The wizarding world, for all its wisdom and power, fell victim to this illusion. Voldemort might have remained undefeated had he laughed at Trelawney instead of listening. Harry might have lived a quieter life without being the chosen one, but once belief took root, events unfolded like clockwork. The scariest thought of all is not that prophecy dictates destiny, but that human beings create destiny by choosing to obey words that might otherwise have been forgotten in the smoke of a dingy pub. Number 21, The Mystery of Avada Kedavra. Of all the spells whispered in hushed tones in the wizarding world, Avada Kedavra stands apart. It is not merely feared for its swiftness or its finality, but for the mystery that lingers in the silence after it has been cast. No wounds are left, no visible cause remains, only a body fallen still, as if the very essence of life has been extinguished by an unseen hand. Readers of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire will recall the chilling moment in the graveyard when Voldemort raised his wand, spoke those words, and Cedric Diggory's life ended instantly. Rowling writes, a jet of green light issued from Voldemort's wand and hit Cedric in the chest. His eyes widened in shock. He was dead before he hit the ground. What unsettles us is not only Cedric's death, but the clinical perfection of the spell. The absence of physical injury suggests a darker purpose behind its creation, a reason that has less to do with battle and more to do with secrets. When we examine wizarding history, we must ask, why did anyone invent such a curse in the first place? Wizards have always known countless ways to kill: fire, drowning, enchanted weapons, transfigurations gone fatally wrong. Even a stunning spell used carelessly could lead to death if the victim struck their head. Yet, Avada Kedavra was different because it removed the ordinary traces of violence. A body killed by this spell could not be distinguished from one who had simply fallen lifeless in their sleep. It is no stretch to imagine its early use in political assassinations, in the darkened chambers of ambitious wizards seeking power without consequence. A minister toppled overnight, a rival silenced without suspicion. This curse seems tailor-made for intrigue. Unlike poison or blade, it left no evidence for investigators, no potion residue or cursed wound. It offered a perfect crime to those willing to use it. The question becomes even more unsettling when we recall how the wizarding world regards intention. Magic responds to the inner will of the caster. It is shaped by emotion and desire as much as by the incantation itself. We know from Lupin's teaching about boggarts and patronuses that the caster's feelings define the result. So why then is Avada Kedavra classified among the unforgivable curses, when killing could easily be accomplished through other spells and methods? Perhaps the answer lies not in the act of murder itself, but in the way this particular curse severs the connection between soul and body. When Molly Weasley defeats Bellatrix Lestrange, she uses a well-aimed curse, and Bellatrix falls lifeless, yet Molly faces no trial for using an unforgivable. The distinction rests in the ritual of Avada Kedavra, which demands not just killing intent, but absolute malice, a focused will to erase existence. Its cruelty is absolute because it does not allow for accidents, for hesitation, or for anything less than deliberate murder. We should consider the chilling symmetry between the curse and Voldemort himself. Tom Riddle sought more than dominance. He sought permanence through the destruction of others. The killing curse became his signature, the green flash a mark of terror wherever he went. Yet Voldemort did not create the spell. Ancient grimoires long before his birth carried its incantation, preserved through centuries like a poisonous relic. Dark wizards, from the time of the early Middle Ages, are rumoured to have wielded it in feudal disputes, erasing rivals under the veil of natural death. Wizards of that era feared public trials and suspicion as much as their enemies' wands, and Avada Kedavra provided the perfect disguise. It is telling that when Dumbledore explains the unforgivable curses in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, he emphasizes not just their power, but their role in history. The use of any one of them on a fellow human being is enough to earn a life sentence in Azkaban. The Ministry outlawed them not merely because they killed, but because they represented tools of tyranny. One might argue that Avada Kedavra exists as the embodiment of the darkest human desire to silence without consequence. To imagine a wizard first whispering its syllables is to picture someone not driven by passion or desperation, but by cold calculation. Other deaths leave scars, blood, witnesses. This spell leaves only silence. In that way, it mirrors the corruption of politics, where ambition thrives in the shadows. To suggest that it was devised for political murder is not speculation born of paranoia, but a logical reading of the curse's very design. Imagine a noble house during a medieval wizarding council where succession meant power. A sudden collapse of a patriarch, eyes open in shock but no sign of foul play. What better way to seize a throne? And yet there is another dimension that unsettles us even more. Wizards often speak of the soul. The Dementor's kiss, for example, consumes the soul and leaves behind a shell. Dumbledore himself suggests that Horcruxes tear the soul in ways unnatural and grotesque. Avada Kedavra may not ravage the soul in the same way, but it severs it so cleanly, so utterly, that no mark is left even on the body. It is as though the soul is banished from both memory and trace, hurled into an abyss with no visible tether. This may explain why the curse is unforgivable, not because it kills, but because it denies even the dignity of remembrance. A victim of fire or blade may be mourned through the evidence of their passing, but the victim of Avada Kedavra is erased in silence, their death transformed into a void. Consider the way Harry's parents died. Lily and James Potter were murdered in Godric's Hollow, and the house still bore the ruins of that night. Yet their bodies carried no wounds, no sign of the violent struggle that had ended them. Harry's own survival of the curse remains the greatest mystery in the wizarding world. The killing curse, Voldemort sneered in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and your mother died trying to save you. The scar on Harry's forehead is not the scar of an ordinary battle. It is the residue of a curse that should have left nothing at all. This anomaly proves that the spell does not behave like ordinary magic. It does not bruise or burn, but it leaves behind an unnatural signature, one that connects victim and killer in ways no other curse does. In this light, we must ask, why is a simple spell of immobilization followed by a fall not considered equally dark? If intention alone defined moral weight, then a wizard who petrifies and then kills would be guilty of the same crime. But here the Ministry draws a line between human cruelty and the invention of tools designed for it. Avada Kedavra is not just about intention, it is a codified expression of absolute murder by criminalizing the autos. Spell itself, the Ministry acknowledges that some knowledge is too dangerous to permit, regardless of intent. It is the difference between a kitchen knife and a blade forged only for assassination. The existence of such a weapon reshapes society, for its very availability tempts its use. Another curious detail lies in the incantation itself. Avada Kedavra sounds eerily similar to the Aramaic phrase abracadabra, meaning, "Let the thing be destroyed." Scholars in the wizarding world believe the ancient incantation was corrupted over centuries into the killing curse we know today. If true, this suggests the spell was born not in chaos, but in ritual magic, designed originally as a tool of erasure, perhaps even to banish disease or pestilence. What began as a charm to destroy illness may have been twisted into the darkest curse of all, a perversion of healing into death. In this possibility lies the greatest tragedy, that Avada Kedavra might once have been intended as salvation. The psychology of the curse also deserves scrutiny. When Bellatrix Lestrange, cackling in her madness, hurls the curse at her enemies, we see that it requires not merely words, but complete commitment. Half-hearted attempts do nothing. The caster must mean it with every fibre of their being. This was why Harry, in his fury against Bellatrix after Sirius's death, failed to use it. Rowling writes, Harry had never used an unforgivable curse before. He wanted her to suffer as he had suffered, but his voice cracked with the strain. The spell was feeble, and Bellatrix laughed. The failure underscores the nature of the curse. It demands more than anger. It demands the will to extinguish life entirely. That requirement alone makes it unforgivable, for it reflects not a moment of passion, but a surrender to the darkest intent. Dumbledore himself hints at this truth when speaking to Harry about choices. Magic reflects who we are, not just what we say. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, he reminds Harry, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." The killing curse embodies the choice of annihilation. Unlike other means of violence, it admits no ambiguity, no chance of accident. To cast it successfully, one must choose to embrace the void, to become an agent of it. This is why society condemns it uniquely, for in casting it, a wizard aligns themselves with a philosophy of nothingness. When Voldemort unleashed the curse against Harry in the Forbidden Forest, the act was more than an execution. It was his attempt to impose absolute silence upon the one symbol of hope in the wizarding world. Yet the spell rebounded as it had years before, and Voldemort fell. Here we see perhaps the ultimate irony of Avada Kedavra. Though it claims to leave no trace, its use brands the wielder forever. The history of the Dark Lord is inseparable from the green flash of death. His followers knew him by it, his enemies feared him for it, and the world remembers him through it. In seeking to erase others, he carved his own memory into legend. If we trace the curse through the series, its victims form a pattern: Cedric Diggory, Lily and James Potter, countless unnamed innocents. Each death was swift, clean, and without mark. Yet each carried enormous weight, shifting the balance of war and the fate of the wizarding world. The silence it leaves is deceptive, for the consequences echo louder than any other spell. In that sense, Avada Kedavra is not simply a curse of death, it is a curse of absence, and absence itself becomes the greatest wound. Thus the true horror of the killing curse may not be in the act of murder, but in the philosophy it enshrines. It teaches that existence can be erased without memory, that life can vanish without evidence. To wield it is to believe that nothing matters except power, that all bonds of soul and body can be severed in an instant. Perhaps this is why it is called unforgivable, not because the victim is lost, but because the caster has embraced a void from which they cannot return. Avada Kedavra is not simply the end of life, it is the end of meaning itself. Number 22. Why did nobody check Harry's broom? Of all the mysteries that surround the story of Harry Potter, one of the most overlooked questions lies hidden in plain sight. In the Chamber of Secrets, Harry receives a broomstick, and not just any broomstick, but a Nimbus 2001 delivered anonymously and with an aura of prestige. What astonishes the careful reader is not the generosity of this gift, but the sheer lack of caution displayed by the adults at Hogwarts. At a school where curses, hexes, and dark magic are common knowledge, why did no one insist on checking this broomstick for hidden enchantments? It is a detail small enough to escape most eyes, but alarming once noticed, for a broom in the wrong hands could become a weapon more dangerous than a wand. The oversight speaks volumes about the culture of trust and negligence that runs beneath the stone walls of the school. The Nimbus 2001 arrives like a symbol of status, shimmering with the promise of speed and control. Draco Malfoy flaunts his own set of Nimbus 2001 brooms for the Slytherin Quidditch team, purchased by Lucius Malfoy, and the spectacle creates envy across the school. The broom Harry receives, however, is different. It comes not as part of a bulk gift to a team, but as a mysterious package, a single broom intended for one boy. Professor McGonagall herself reacts with visible admiration when she sees it, her voice filled with excitement at such a finely crafted object. In the text we read, "It's a Nimbus 2001, how on earth?" Her astonishment is natural, but her caution is absent. The adults are so distracted by the glamour of the gift that none of them stop to ask the obvious question, who would dare send an expensive broom to a second-year student, and why? The lack of suspicion becomes more troubling when compared to earlier events. In the Philosopher's Stone, Harry nearly falls to his death during his first Quidditch match because his Nimbus 2000 is cursed. Quirrell, under Voldemort's influence, mutters a jinx to shake Harry from the broom, and only the quick thinking of Hermione Granger saves him. This event sets a precedent. Broomsticks are vulnerable to magical interference. The fact that Harry's very first year at Hogwarts includes such an attack should have alerted every teacher to the risks. A broom is not a neutral toy. It is an enchanted object with layers of spellwork woven into its handle and twigs. If a curse can tamper with it once, it can do so again. Yet when the Nimbus 2001 appears, no checks are performed, no charms are cast to scan for dark magic, and Harry is permitted to fly it without hesitation. Hermione's suspicions in the second book highlight what the professors ignored. While the others marvel at the broom, she raises the uncomfortable truth. It could have been tampered with, it could be cursed, it could be a trap. She is not seduced by the prestige of the brand name. In fact, she reminds her friends that the broom had been sent mysteriously, without explanation, and from an unknown benefactor. The narrative shows that Hermione, still only 12 years old, embodies more caution than the experienced professors. Her instinct reflects the reader's unease. A child recognizes the danger while the adults turn a blind eye, and the tension between youthful vigilance and institutional complacency becomes glaring. The broom itself is symbolic of a broader negligence. Hogwarts is notorious for its dangerous environment. From the Forbidden Forest to the shifting staircases, from the three-headed dog in the Philosopher's Stone to the basilisk lurking in the walls of the Chamber of Secrets, the school seems to invite peril. Yet the acceptance of danger often comes disguised as tradition. Students are expected to play Quidditch, a sport that sends children hurtling through the air at terrifying speeds, with bludgers enchanted to strike with the force of iron fists. The possibility of sabotage should have been at the forefront of every safety protocol. A broom, once cursed, can do more than throw a rider off balance. It can crash them into stone towers, drag them high into the sky, or plummet them into the ground. The risk is not hypothetical. We already saw it happen in Harry's first year. The oversight raises disturbing questions about the role of the faculty. Professor McGonagall, head of Gryffindor House and deputy headmistress, is described as a stern, pragmatic figure, one who rarely lets emotion cloud her judgment. Yet even she seems swept away by the glamour of the Nimbus 2001. Her admiration blinds her to the obvious threat. Dumbledore, meanwhile, the one wizard always portrayed as a guardian against dark magic, shows no sign of intervention. He knows better than anyone that Voldemort's followers are cunning, manipulative, and desperate to harm Harry. Allowing him to fly on an unchecked broomstick borders on reckless indifference. Was it overconfidence in their own abilities, or was it a deliberate narrative choice to highlight that Hogwarts, for all its wisdom, remains a place where danger often slips through the cracks? The comparison with wands underscores the peculiarity. When Harry first buys his wand at Ollivander's, the connection between wizard and wand is tested, monitored, and understood. Wands are treated as extensions of the wizard's soul, worthy of great reverence and care. Yet broomsticks, though enchanted, are treated like consumer goods, subject to brand rivalry and sporting competition, but not to magical scrutiny. And yet a broom in motion, carrying a child at blinding speed, can kill as easily as any spell. The inconsistency between the caution shown toward wands and the negligence toward brooms reveals a blind spot in the wizarding world's sense of safety. The narrative irony deepens when we remember that Lucius Malfoy, the same man who delivered cursed objects into Hogwarts, such as Tom Riddle's diary, was responsible for supplying Nimbus 2001s to the Slytherin team. The school tolerated this blatant act of favoritism, allowing a known supporter of Voldemort to flood the campus with enchanted objects. If Lucius could send brooms to Slytherin without scrutiny, what would stop a darker figure from sending a cursed broom to Harry? The diary proved how easily a dangerous artifact could slip past the school's fences. The broom might have done the same. Yet no one seems to connect these dots. The lesson becomes clearer when viewed through the lens of Hogwarts' repeated failures of oversight. Time and again, dangerous objects infiltrate the school. The diary, the cursed necklace in Half-Blood Prince, the goblet in Goblet of Fire. Each time, adults fail to anticipate the danger, and it falls to children, Hermione, Harry, Ron, to notice the threat. The Nimbus 2001 episode fits this pattern perfectly. It is not only a symbol of privilege and favoritism, it is also a stark reminder of how vulnerable Harry remains, even when surrounded by the most powerful witches and wizards in Britain. Quotes from the books underscore this troubling reality. When Harry's Nimbus 2000 is first sabotaged, Rowling writes, "The broom gave a violent jerk. Harry was clinging on for dear life, his knuckles white on the broomstick." The image is haunting, a child dangling hundreds of feet above the ground, helpless against the invisible force trying to hurl him into death. That moment should have seared itself into the collective memory of the faculty. The fact that a year later no one thinks to examine the Nimbus 2001 illustrates the alarming short-term memory of Hogwarts guardians. Danger becomes normalized, and near tragedies are quickly forgotten. Hermione's reaction serves as the lone voice of reason. She does not marvel at the broom's elegance or envy Harry's good fortune. Instead, she bristles at the recklessness of trusting it. Her suspicion that the broom could be cursed echoes the earlier moment when she saved Harry in the Quidditch match by distracting Quirrell. In both cases, Hermione demonstrates that vigilance, not complacency, is what saves lives. Her role in the story is not merely as the voice of knowledge, but as the conscience of caution, reminding both her friends and the reader that danger often lurks beneath glamour. The broader implications of this negligence extend beyond Quidditch. Hogwarts represents the entire magical community's approach to safety. If a school that trains children for 7 years in spellcasting cannot manage to check a broom for curses, what does this say about the society at large? The wizarding world thrives on tradition, secrecy, and pride, but these qualities also blind it to vulnerabilities. Dark wizards exploit precisely these weaknesses, slipping cursed objects into the fabric of daily life, counting on the inattentiveness of those in power. The Nimbus 2001 is therefore more than just a broom. It is a microcosm of systemic neglect. A darker interpretation emerges when considering the narrative's central theme. Harry is never safe, even at Hogwarts. The lack of precaution with the Nimbus 2001 reinforces the idea that the boy who lived must rely on his own friends and instincts rather than the institution meant to protect him. Time and again it is Hermione's cleverness, Ron's loyalty, or Harry's bravery that prevent disaster, not the vigilance of teachers. The unchecked broom highlights the precariousness of Harry's situation, a boy targeted by the darkest wizard of the age, yet treated as if danger is an afterthought. Finally, the unanswered question lingers. What if the broom had been cursed? What if Harry, upon mounting the Nimbus 2001, had been hurled to the ground, his bones shattered before the eyes of thousands in the Quidditch stands? The tragedy would have been preventable, the negligence unforgivable. Rowling never lets this nightmare unfold, but the possibility is always there, lurking behind the text, haunting those who notice the oversight. The Nimbus 2001 shines as a gift, but in truth it is a glowing warning, a reminder that trust without scrutiny is perilous, and that in the wizarding world even a broomstick can carry the weight of life and death. Number 23, Secrets of Family Relics. Of all the mysteries in the wizarding world, few are as compelling as the question of family relics and their hidden power. The magical community has always treasured heirlooms, passing them down through generations not simply as objects of memory, but as vessels of authority, prestige, and sometimes unimaginable enchantment. When one looks at the old houses of Britain, such as the noble and most ancient House of Black, it becomes clear that these families saw their possessions as extensions of their legacy. The Black family's infamous tapestry, for example, was more than a decorative piece of fabric. It mapped bloodlines, revealed allegiances, and silently judged those who dared to betray the ideals of pure blood supremacy. Such a tapestry may not hurl a curse or deflect a spell, yet its magic lay in its permanence, its quiet record of history, unalterable and binding in its truth. It was not just a family tree, it was a magical testament, a document with a soul of its own. Consider then the relics of other houses, ones far older than the Blacks. Godric Gryffindor, one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts, left behind a sword, not just any weapon, but a blade forged by goblins, who imbued it with properties that defied time. The sword of Gryffindor absorbed that which strengthened it, venom, courage, defiance, and grew ever more powerful. When Harry pulled it from the sorting hat in his 2nd year, Rowling described it as gleaming brightly, as though it had just been polished, though it had been lying in the hat for centuries. That moment was a revelation. A school relic, thought of as mere founder's lore, became the difference between life and death when Harry faced the basilisk. Yet even this mighty sword was not used in the everyday affairs of Hogwarts or the Ministry. It was admired, revered, perhaps even neglected, until the moment destiny demanded it. The Potter family, by contrast, possessed something less visible, but far more elusive, the cloak of invisibility. Passed from father to son for centuries, it became, in time, one of the three legendary Deathly Hallows. Albus Dumbledore himself remarked on its uniqueness. It is a cloak that really and truly renders the wearer completely invisible, more than a simple disillusionment charm, more than a poor duplication which would fade with the years. Unlike lesser cloaks, this one did not tarnish nor weaken, nor allow a keen eye to pierce its veil. And yet, as astonishing as it was, the Potters treated it as a family keepsake, not a weapon of last resort. James Potter used it for pranks with the marauders, sneaking into Hogsmeade or out of curfew. To him, the cloak was a mischievous delight, a tool for rule-breaking rather than a shield against death. This paradox becomes striking when we recall the night of 31st of October, 1981. Voldemort had hunted the Potters to Godric's Hollow. He came armed with prophecy and murder in his mind. James and Lily, brilliant and resourceful, had only moments to prepare for their doom. And yet there was the cloak, folded, hidden, almost forgotten in the cupboard. Why did they not use it? Why not wrap themselves and their child in its folds, disappear from sight, frustrate the Dark Lord even for a few minutes more? Here lies one of the strangest mysteries of the Potter legacy. Dumbledore, who borrowed the cloak before Harry's birth, returned it quietly to Harry in his first year with the note, "Use it well." But James had not used it when it might have mattered most. It is tempting to judge him for this omission, but history is rarely so simple. James was not a man who lived in fear. He confronted Voldemort without wand in hand, shouting for Lily to take Harry and run. He believed in defiance, not in hiding. The cloak, to James, was never meant as a shield from mortal danger. It was a boyhood relic, powerful but underestimated, like a sword kept only for display. Perhaps he believed that the Fidelius charm, with Peter Pettigrew as secret keeper, would protect them beyond the need for any physical disguise. Perhaps Lily thought that no cloth, no matter how enchanted, could shield them from the destiny Voldemort carried in his wand. This raises a troubling idea. Wizards and witches may often undervalue the true worth of their heirlooms. They inherit these objects, admire them, and use them casually, forgetting the centuries of magic bound into them. The cloak was dismissed as a prankster's delight until the truth emerged. It was death's own gift, capable of hiding the living from even the most penetrating magical sight. The sword of Gryffindor was displayed in a glass case until it answered the call of a true Gryffindor. The tapestry of the Blacks was dismissed as antiquated until it revealed secrets of kinship and betrayal that shaped the fate of Sirius and his house. Imagine then what might lie, still forgotten, in the vaults of ancient families. The Lestranges guarded Helga Hufflepuff's cup in their Gringotts chamber, never knowing that the fragment of Voldemort's soul within it corrupted the very air around it. The Malfoys, proud and cunning, possessed generations of heirlooms. Might one of them carry magic untapped, left to collect dust? Even the Weasleys, though impoverished, preserved the family clock that tracked the whereabouts and dangers of each member. Arthur Weasley once remarked that the clock was not useful, but very reassuring. Yet was it only reassurance, or could it have been something more, an ancient spell of protective connection between blood relatives? The wizarding world is built upon this paradox of treasure and ignorance. Consider how easily Ron dismissed the Deluminator left to him by Dumbledore. It seemed at first a trinket, a toy for putting out lights. Only later did it guide Ron back to Harry and Hermione, whispering with Dumbledore's foresight. What greater proof could there be that even the smallest relic might hold unexpected strength? Wizards live among wonders, but often cannot see them until necessity reveals their worth. The Deathly Hallows themselves embody this irony. The Elder Wand, history's most feared weapon, brought death to nearly every wizard who sought it. Its power was clear, undeniable, but also cursed by obsession. The Resurrection Stone, hidden in a simple golden snitch, was so underestimated that Harry almost forgot its existence until the final walk into the Forbidden Forest. And the invisibility cloak, underestimated for centuries, proved to be the most faithful of all, the one that outlasted generations. The true master does not seek to run away from death. He accepts that he must die and understands that there are far worse things in the living world than dying, Dumbledore explained to Harry. Yet how ironic it is that the cloak, the gentlest of the Hallows, was used for games by James and Sirius rather than for survival. One cannot help but speculate what other hidden heirlooms linger unrecognized. Could the Crouch family, so obsessed with ministry power, have locked away an artifact of old that they never fully understood? Did the Carrows, later servants of Voldemort, inherit something that might have altered the course of their lives if properly used? Even the Gaunt family, last of Slytherin's bloodline, treated the Peverell ring as nothing but a trinket, wearing it despite its curse until it destroyed Marvolo's hand. They died in squalor, surrounded by treasures they could not see for what they were. The tragedy, then, is not that relics lack power, but that wizards often lack imagination. They cling to tradition, use what is convenient, and ignore what does not announce itself. Harry himself nearly lost the cloak to Dumbledore's curiosity, only for it to return to him with a new purpose. Hermione once reminded him in The Tales of Beedle the Bard that wizards have a knack for choosing precisely the things that are worst for them. Perhaps this applies not only to choices of action, but also to choices of what to value. In the end, the lesson of these family relics is haunting. Magic, no matter how grand, may slumber unnoticed if those who inherit it do not believe in its worth. The Potters, the Blacks, the Gryffindors, each carried legacies beyond price, yet even they underestimated what they had until history forced their hand. The night Voldemort came to Godric's Hollow, the cloak remained folded, silent, unused. Only years later would Harry understand that it was not just a piece of fabric, but a key to a philosophy of life and death. How many other such keys lie hidden, unrecognized, in the cupboards and vaults of Wizarding Britain? The question lingers. Unsettling and unresolved, wizards walk through halls filled with relics, portraits, and enchanted objects, many of which they scarcely glance at. The Ministry archives, Hogwarts' hidden chambers, the locked basements of ancestral homes, all may be overflowing with magic that could alter history if only someone believed enough to use it. Until then, the relics remain like sleeping giants, silent testimonies of forgotten power, waiting for a moment when history, once again, will call them to life. Number 24. Random victims of magic. Of all the questions raised by J.K. Rowling's world, few are as unsettling as the thought of those who suffered by accident, simply because magic existed near them. The wizarding world is dazzling, but behind its shimmering veil lies a constant potential for chaos. When young wizards experiment with spells, when duels flare in alleyways, or when magical creatures slip into the wrong place, collateral damage is almost guaranteed. The stories we are told in the books follow the great battles, the chosen ones, the villains. Yet in the shadows there must have been countless lives upended by spells that were never meant for them. The statute of secrecy exists not only to shield wizards from exposure, but to protect ordinary people from the dangerous ripples of magical life. And still, no law, however strict, can undo the reality that accidental victims are everywhere in this world. Imagine the corridors of Hogwarts where children are entrusted with wands that can summon fire, disarm opponents, or freeze bodies stiff in mid-motion. Harry himself admits in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix that just pointing your wand and saying the incantation isn't enough, because mispronunciation or lack of focus changes everything. During dueling practice with Dumbledore's army, Neville Longbottom was often the unlucky target. A jinx gone awry left him unable to remove his legs from the ground for several hours. This was comic relief in the story, but if we look at it soberly, the implications are darker. How many students fell from staircases after a misfired Expelliarmus? How many ended up in the hospital wing, bones shattered, dignity stripped, all because a friend lacked precision? Madame Pomfrey's skills made most accidents invisible in the long run, but the pain, fear, and perhaps scars remained. One striking moment comes in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, when Gilderoy Lockhart tries to mend Harry's broken arm after a Quidditch accident. Instead of repairing the bone, he removes every single one. Harry recalls the sensation as strange and unpleasant, as though his arm were deflating. Here was a celebrated adult wizard, supposedly a master of his craft, leaving a student in agony with a flick of his wand. This is a perfect reminder that accidents were not limited to children. If a teacher, armed with decades of experience and a celebrated career, could make such a catastrophic mistake, then the scale of unseen damage across the magical world must have been far greater than we are ever told. The dangers are not only physical, memory itself is fragile under magical influence. The Ministry's obliviators were constantly dispatched to deal with what they called Muggle sightings. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, after the chaos at the Quidditch World Cup, Arthur Weasley calmly explains that Muggles who saw Death Eaters levitating and torturing them would have their memories altered. The Muggles are in for a rough time, he notes grimly, knowing that the Ministry would erase hours, perhaps days, of their recollection. But memory charms are not perfect. Bertha Jorkins, whose life was defined by a badly performed charm, spent years confused and fragmented before Voldemort finally destroyed her. If one witch could be so broken by magic meant to help, what happened to the hundreds of nameless Muggles caught in the crossfire of wizarding secrecy? Even in moments of triumph, random lives were disrupted. Consider the Battle of the Seven Potters, when 6 of Harry's friends drank Polyjuice potion to impersonate him. The skies over Surrey erupted in chaos. Spells, curses, and green flashes streaked through the night. Hagrid's motorbike roared as killing curses sliced through the air. The scene was cinematic, but hidden beneath it is a troubling question. That battle was fought over a busy part of southern England. How many ordinary people looked up at the lights, terrified? How many were struck accidentally by stray curses? The Order and Death Eaters alike were desperate, reckless, flinging deadly magic into the sky. For each celebrated duel, there must have been untold moments when a window shattered, a roof collapsed, or a car swerved into disaster. Some victims are not left to speculation. The Creevey brothers, Colin and Dennis, were both Muggle-born, and their enthusiasm for magic often drew them into danger. Colin, armed only with his camera, nearly died in his second year when the basilisk's gaze petrified him. While not a victim of friendly fire, his story underscores how unprepared outsiders were for the dangers around them. Colin's parents, ordinary milkmen, could never have imagined that their son would spend months frozen like a stone statue. Multiply this by thousands of Muggle-born children, each thrown into a castle where hexes, jinxes, and monsters roam freely, and the number of accidents grows overwhelming. The world outside Hogwarts was no safer. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, The Death Eaters unleashed terror in the Muggle world as part of Voldemort's campaign. Bridges collapse, and people vanish without explanation. To the Muggle press, these are accidents or tragedies. To the wizarding world, they are side effects of dark magic. Even when Voldemort's followers are not directly attacking, the instability of magic ensures casualties. A misdirected curse from a duel in Diagon Alley could strike a passerby. A careless apparition could splinch an unfortunate companion. When the Ministry fought back, their attempts at control often left both wizards and Muggles scarred. The Triwizard Tournament presents another telling case. When dragons were brought into Hogwarts for the first task, the focus was on Harry's bravery. Yet hundreds of students, teachers, and even visiting delegations sat only a short distance away, separated from fire-breathing beasts by magical barriers. Ludo Bagman cheerfully announced, "Time to place your bets." But the potential for mass casualties was enormous. If a barrier had failed, or if a dragon had escaped control for even a moment, dozens could have died. The thrill of spectacle blinded the wizarding community to how close they came to creating more random victims of magic. In quieter ways, everyday spells threatened ordinary lives. When Ron attempts to curse Draco Malfoy in Chamber of Secrets but ends up vomiting slugs for hours because of his broken wand, it is portrayed as humorous. But beneath the comedy lies an undeniable truth. Defective wands, miscast spells, and reckless behavior were everywhere. If slugs could fill Ron's stomach, what stopped a poorly executed hex from causing organ damage, paralysis, or worse? And this is just what we saw through the lens of Harry's life. Outside of his story, other wizards surely made mistakes with consequences far more gruesome. Magical creatures added further risk. The hippogriffs, centaurs, and thestrals within Hogwarts grounds alone presented countless opportunities for accidents. Buckbeak slashed Draco Malfoy's arm in Prisoner of Azkaban, nearly causing his death. Draco survived, but only because Hagrid and Dumbledore were there to intervene. What of students who wandered into the Forbidden Forest at the wrong time? Centaurs fired arrows without hesitation. Acromantulas lurked in darkness. Even unicorns, innocent as they seemed, drew predators that brought death. Each of these encounters hints at others, unseen, where the random victims of magic were not so lucky. The veil of secrecy shrouded every one of these incidents. Obliviators erased the memories of Muggles who stumbled across giants, dragons, or wand fights. Yet memory erasure was itself an act of violence. What becomes of a person whose recollections are fractured repeatedly? Could an entire lifetime of small missing pieces accumulate into confusion, madness, or despair? The books never dwell on this, but Rowling gives us small glimpses. When Hermione alters her own parents' memories to keep them safe, she admits in Deathly Hallows that she gave them new identities, new memories. She weeps at the cost. If such an act broke Hermione's heart, how much worse must it have been for nameless families who lost their history without even knowing? The irony is that wizards themselves seem oblivious to these tragedies. For Harry and his friends, accidents became part of school life, shrugged off as lessons learned. For the Ministry, random Muggle casualties were mere administrative tasks, reports to be filed, minds to be cleaned. Yet to the victims, the impact must have been earth-shattering. A child who lost a parent to a collapsing bridge, a shopkeeper whose memories no longer lined up, a student who never recovered from a curse gone wrong. These stories were erased, not because they lacked importance, but because the wizarding world chose not to remember them. The Great Wars of Voldemort dominate the narrative of Harry Potter. But behind every battle, hundreds of random lives were twisted, shattered, or simply erased. Wizards may have believed that secrecy was kindness, that forgetting was safety. In truth, these accidents remind us that magic is not only wondrous but perilous, and that the cost of every spell stretches far beyond the one who casts it. By asking how many fell as random victims of magic, we confront the uncomfortable truth that the wizarding world we love is haunted by invisible ghosts, those who were never meant to be part of the story, yet paid its price in full. Number 25. Silence of the Prophecies Hall. The Hall of Prophecies in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix is one of the most haunting locations Rowling ever created, and yet it is almost never questioned by the characters themselves. A towering labyrinth of shelves, each filled with fragile glass orbs whispering the fates of witches and wizards, it represents the very essence of destiny crystallized into objects. When Harry first walks into that place, he describes the shelves as stretching endlessly, row after row of cold spheres, each glowing faintly with a ghostly light. The silence of the room is described as heavy and unnatural, as if every voice has been locked away inside those orbs. This detail leads to an unsettling question that the books never answer. Who is responsible for placing these prophecies in the Ministry's keeping? They do not appear on the shelves by accident. Someone records them, transfers them into spheres, and files them with meticulous precision. But the books leave only silence, and that silence is almost more telling than any explanation could be. The most famous prophecy in the series, the one Sybil Trelawney delivers to Albus Dumbledore about the child destined to vanquish Voldemort, serves as our central case study. Trelawney herself speaks in a trance, her voice becoming harsh and deep, unlike her usual airy tones, as the book recalls. She has no memory of what she says afterward, yet somehow that prophecy ends up encased in a dusty orb, and locked on a shelf in the Hall of Prophecies, labelled with the initials of those it concerns. We know Severus Snape overheard part of it and delivered what he heard to Voldemort, but even before Harry touches the sphere, the prophecy is there, waiting for him, glowing faintly with the words he was destined to hear. Did the Ministry intercept the trance? Did Dumbledore himself hand it over? The text never clarifies. It is as though there is a hidden bureaucracy, invisible to both wizard and reader, quietly capturing every utterance of destiny in the world. The implication is chilling. If Sybil Trelawney, whose reliability is mocked constantly by her students, has her true prophecies preserved in the Ministry, then surely she is not the only seer being monitored. Hundreds of prophets might exist, scattered through wizarding Britain and beyond, each occasionally falling into genuine trances. Every time such a trance occurs, the words somehow flow into the archives. One cannot help but wonder whether there is a division of the Department of Mysteries dedicated solely to this surveillance. Do unspeakables sit in shadowy rooms, connected by magical instruments to the voices of every registered or even unregistered seer, waiting for the moment when a prophecy breaks free? The notion is not far-fetched when we remember that the Department of Mysteries already manipulates time, death, and thought. Why not fate as well? If this is true, the Hall of Prophecies is not simply a storage room, it is a mechanism of control. The Ministry, by possessing every prophecy, holds the potential to anticipate wars, rebellions, even natural disasters in the magical world. Yet Rowling shows us that the Ministry is consistently blind to true threats. They deny Voldemort's return, they persecute Harry, and they expend energy on bureaucracy while chaos brews. Why then do they not use the power that lies beneath their feet? Perhaps the answer is not ignorance, but choice. Perhaps certain prophecies are quietly ignored, left to unfold because the outcome is politically or personally convenient. It is a haunting thought. The ministry may not be incompetent so much as complicit.